The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Well, welcome back to True News. I'm Rick Wiles. The struggle to expose the false identity of Barack Hussein Obama, also known as Barry Soetoro to his close friends. Well, it's like having a conversation with the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. Reality doesn't matter. Up is down, in is out, red is blue. His supporters in the news media are adamant in not intelligently discussing the mountain of discrepancies in Obama's life, such as his fraudulent use of a Connecticut Social Security number. Well, another expert has stepped forward to declare that Obama's long-form birth certificate image posted on a government website, whitehouse.gov, is a fraudulent document created with Adobe software. Mara Zebest is a nationally recognized computer expert, and she recently told Dr. Jerome Corsi at WorldNet Daily that the, quote, PDF file released by the White House contains evidence of manipulation, suggesting that one or more forgers utilized existing Hawaiian birth certificates to assemble fraudulently for Barack Obama a document the president presented to the world as authentic. Mara Zebest is on the telephone. Mara, welcome to True News.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, Mara, before we get into your analysis of the image, give our audience a brief description of your professional background that makes you qualified to analyze the birth certificate image on whitehouse.gov.
Okay. Well, for 11 years now, I've been a contributing author and technical editor for many, many books. A dozen of them have been for Adobe software. In addition to that, I've also worked in a printing company, and I've done work for schools, teaching the staff, students. In fact, I was guest instructor for a person's class for the Photoshop software, and have done numerous things in graphic design as well as printing and marketing and stuff like that to work with these programs.
Okay, so you've been a contributing writer or editor to dozens of books about Adobe software.
Correct.
All right, that's good enough for me. Now let's take a look at the Obama birth certificate image. Within hours after it was posted on the White House website, which is an official government agency website, which means if you put something fraudulent on that website, you have violated federal laws. Within hours, Mara, of that of Obama releasing his birth certificate, I was inundated with emails from people, including listeners of this program, who are employed in design, graphic design agencies and advertising agencies. I was inundated with emails from people saying, "Rick, this is, I can't believe what I'm seeing. This is a complete hoax." I mean, within hours, I was getting the emails.
And I don't doubt it, because within seconds after looking at the document, I could see that it was a hoax. I mean, it just didn't take me long. I kept expecting, I actually got, the morning that it was released, I got a call from a friend of mine. She actually woke me up very early, and said, early for me at least, and said, you won't believe what Obama's doing. He's releasing this long form, and if anybody can tell if it's real or fake, I know it's you. You've got to look at this thing, So I'm like wiping the sleep out of my eyes and going, okay, give me a few minutes, let me download it and see what I can see. I actually expected to, have some sort of, a search that would take, a while to see if there was any clues, whether it was legitimate or not. But within seconds after opening it up, I'm just like stunned. My mouth is hanging open. I can't believe how easy it is to spot everything that's wrong with this document.
So are you saying that it's actually a very amateurish, fraudulent document?
Oh, absolutely. Beyond amateurish. I mean, I just, anybody that's sitting there trying to put out something that looks real, I can't believe the mistakes that they made.
All right, so the CIA didn't do it, an intelligence agency didn't do it, the Bilderberg guys didn't do it, because this is such a sloppy job that those agencies and those organizations wouldn't want to be connected with something so sloppy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And let me just tell you a little story. When I opened it up, one of the first things I saw, I opened it up in Illustrator first. I know that Illustrator is one of those Adobe programs that can read all of the data that's embedded in a PDF file. So I went to Illustrator first, looked at the layers palette, couldn't believe that I'm seeing layers. Layers in itself, for listeners that might not be familiar with graphics software, but any image only should have, if it has not been edited, should only have one layer. And it's generally flat. And any indication that there's more than one is an indication, that it's been edited. So I'm seeing all of these layers in the layers palette, and just to confirm, that I'm not crazy of what I'm seeing, I called up a friend of mine who I know works with Photoshop and Adobe software extensively in his job. He lives in the Southern California area, and I call him up, and I don't tell him what he's going to see. I just ask him, I send him a link to the whitehouse.gov site, and I said, I sent you an email. Do me a favor, download Obama's birth certificate and open it up in Illustrator. Look at the layers palette and tell me what you think. And he, I'm waiting for him on the phone to download it and for his program to load and open it up. And like me, within seconds, I just hear on the other end of the phone going, "Oh my God!" And then I hear "Oh my God!" and then he's going, "You got to tell somebody. This is very sloppy. I can't believe what I'm seeing." And I'm thinking, okay, so it's not just me, right? And he's going, "You got to tell somebody." And he was
Mara, doesn't this seem surreal? I mean, you're recognized in the country as an expert on Adobe software. You're looking at a website of the United States government's White House website. You're looking at a document that the President of the United States has given to the world to say, "Look, this is my birth certificate." Did it seem surreal that this was actually happening?
Absolutely, but at the same time, I'm not surprised because, I've been following the stories on the short form, and I agree with most of the stuff that has been put out there on the information on that as well. I've seen numerous documents that he's been forging, including his Secret Service, document, and it didn't really come as a surprise, but it is surreal that this is so blatantly fake, and there's hardly any media coverage on it.
Mm-hmm. You said selective service. I mean, you said Secret Service. You meant selective service.
Yes.
Yes. His draft registration was also fraudulent.
Right. Correct. Yes. I'm sorry.
Like his Social Security number.
Yes.
I've had a number of licensed private investigators on this program who have all sworn that Obama is using a Social Security number issued to a man born in 1890 who lived in Connecticut.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't doubt that that's true. I mean, from what I've seen come out of this White House, nothing surprises me, but what surprises me is the lack of coverage, to report this.
Well, the media is in on the cover-up.
Yeah.
The national media is part of the criminal operation.
Absolutely. The day that this was released, one of the things when he's sitting there telling me, I need to contact somebody, one of the people that I contacted was my local Fox News 40 station. And I decided not to approach it from the standpoint, of somebody calling in and saying, look, this document is fake. So I asked the lady that was taking the calls, I said, is there somebody in one of your departments that has Illustrator that I can talk to? And she said, well, what's this about? And I said, well, I just would like somebody that has Illustrator, understands the program, open up the document in Illustrator, and regardless of what side of the argument you're on, if you know anything about, Illustrator, there's no denying that this document is fake. And so that's how I framed it, and then she just said, well, can I have your name and number? And she took down the information. And about an hour later, I got a call from a reporter wanting to know if they could come over and I could show them everything. And they came over to my house. They were in my house for 2 hours, over an hour which they were filming everything. I was pointing out all of the information, of why this was, not a legitimate document. Both the video guy and the reporter were not denying that it was fake. In fact, their mouth was hanging over at how sloppy it was done, too. They couldn't believe that, they're going, couldn't anybody else see this? And I'm going, absolutely. But, average people who don't know what they're looking for might not download the document, might not, know what to look for if they did. I said, but once you know what you're looking for, it's really obvious to see. And they're asking me all these questions. Over an hour worth of filming. When it came time to actually doing the news report, they aired Obama, laughing and showing, here's my document, of course there's going to be naysayers, And then when it came time to, show my portion of it, they introduced me as the skeptic, and they just said, well, and there's still some skeptics, and they didn't show any of the stuff that I explained. And I'm thinking that's typical, that sums up the media, so.
That's because there was an editor at the TV station who reports to the news controller in Washington. And there is, listen, I have been told, that high-level editors in television stations have confessed, have openly said in private to people that there is some clearinghouse in Washington that certain news stories have to be cleared through as national security. And so that's what happened. There was an editor who was told, no, that story does not go out. It's finished. It's over. So, well, Mara, let's take a few minutes. Tell us, in your professional expertise, what did you see? Tell us what you actually saw that told you this is a fraudulent document. Okay.
In just overall looking at it, even without the Illustrator program, if you just open it up in a PDF, reader program, when you zoom in at high levels and look at the text up, at extremely close levels, you can see all kinds of inconsistencies, and that's the biggest clue. I keep using that word, and, I don't know if people understand what I mean about, inconsistency, but anytime there's an inconsistency, that's a clue that this document wasn't, from one source. And if you zoom in, just the biggest place to start is if you look at the certificate number and you zoom in really close, anywhere from like 350, 400% or higher, you can see it, in which the last number has a different quality to it than all of the numbers that are in front of it.
And this number is, the birth certificate number is 10641.
Right, so it's the last number 1. That's in that number.
And you're saying the 1 is different from the 1064.
Correct.
All right, I'm looking at a image that's blown up, and I clearly see what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last one is very solid.
Well, actually, the last one, if you're looking really close, is when you say solid, you're probably referring to what's known as, the term is called anti-aliasing, where you have a smooth transition on the line, so it looks smooth. Whereas the other numbers have a very jagged, what's known as a bit-mapped edge.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Okay, but as far as the color goes, there's an inconsistency in that too. The other numbers have a solid black color, and the one that has the anti-aliasing has what I refer to as noise. where you can see different tones in the pixels within it. One pixel, might look solid black, but the one next to it might have kind of a light gray color.
Yeah, and I'm looking at a printout. I'm not online right now. I'm looking at a printout, and so this is all in black and white. But that's exactly what I'm seeing. The other numbers, the 1064, are very dark black.
The solid black, no pixelation in the colors.
But the last numeral 1 is more of a kind of a gray.
Right, and because there's different colors of black and gray tones that are making it up, and you can see that when you zoom in.
All right, so what does that tell you?
That they're from different sources. That they're not all from the same source. This was, composited from different sources, and you can see that throughout the document, not just in the number, the certificate number, but if you scroll through, at high zoom level again, you can see that in various locations. One of the areas, like his birth date, you can see that in the number 4 is a solid black with the bitmap jagged edge, and then the comma has the anti-aliasing and the noise. You can also see if you zoom in the August part, there's a solid, I can't tell if it's green or gray color in the center of the G. But then the rest of the text has a white, what I call like a halo effect around it, which is also an indication that there's been editing too, that halo effect that is around all of the text. Another interesting area that I find definitely an indication that there was tampering here is if you compare the boxes 6D with 7E, both of them contain a yes-no box. Do you see where I'm talking? Are you looking at the document?
Yes.
Okay. The 6D yes box is got the solid black X, and the 7E box has the pixelated.
Yes, very
X.
clear.
Yeah.
It's very obvious.
And the letters surrounding the pixelated one on the question are also pixelated, indicating that they had to change those letters because, to coincide with what they were putting in there. And here's the other interesting part. On 7E, right above the box that doesn't have an X, the no box, if you zoom in really close, you can see that the D and I above that box have been exactly duplicated from other D's and I's in the text. I can tell you exactly where it comes from. The I over that box on the word judicial, the I comes from the word inside above it. It looks at pixel for pixel. It's exactly a duplicate.
So they were actually moving individual letters around.
Right, because what I'm guessing probably happened there, that D and that I that's over the box, the X used to be in that box, and the X probably overlapped those letters. So in order to make that box look empty, they had to duplicate the letters from other places in the document.
Okay, Amar, with this printed copy that I have in front of me, in sections D and E, the question is place of birth inside city? If no, give judicial district, yes or no. And then E is residence inside city, or what is it here?
Town limit.
Town limit. If no, give judicial district. Okay, in D, in the word judicial, the C is different from judicial in box E. Is that
correct? Yes, and another indication they're probably moving letters.
These are completely different C's.
Yeah. And that's the sort of thing, like especially those boxes, the differences, meaning that if there's a difference in quality between one box and the other, chances are it's because they're moving stuff around, They're getting it from different sources, copying and pasting and, pretty much compositing the document the way they want it to
yes.
be.
I had Paul Irie on the program, who owned and operated a graphic design agency outside New York City and New Jersey for decades. I mean, he had his agency, some of his clients were major corporations such as Montgomery Ward's and A&P grocery stores. This was back in the 60s and 70s. And he said the same thing. He said, look, in order for this birth certificate to have been typed using a manual typewriter,
right.
He said they had to use multiple manual typewriters to type one document.
Right.
In order to get this many different fonts.
I've actually seen some people that are trying to, debunk everything that I've written actually say that, there was one guy posting on some site that was actually saying that the difference in what's known as kerning, the spacing between letters, the difference of kerning could happen when, people type really fast. And that's the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard in my life.
Or maybe the office clerk was typing and then got a phone call, and then she took the birth certificate out of one typewriter and walked it down to another office and inserted it, and then typed a couple more words and then carried it to another office.
Exactly, and the reason they did that is because in 1961 they knew that this birth certificate was going to be special.
Yes, it was baby Obama's birth certificate. So every typewriter in the building was used in a historical event.
Right.
There we go, we solved it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mara, for being on the program. We have now solved the question of why so many typewriters were used. It's kind of like a presidential signing. When the president will sign documents with 100 different ink pens.
Right.
So they did it with Obama's birth certificate. They had presidential typing event.
Right, and they had some sort of contest. Who could get the most amount of different letters in this document as possible.
Well, this forgery is so ridiculous, we're making jokes about it.
I know.
I mean, the Mossad didn't do this, folks. The Mossad would never have their name put to something like this.
Well, what's even more ridiculous is that there's people actually using those arguments to debunk what it is I'm saying. The thing that I can't get past too is, with every argument that they try to use debunking, saying that I think they initially started out saying that, that can happen with OCR software. And, of course, OCR has been debunked as, been used on this document, so now they're moving to different things. But with every argument that they use, they still can't get past the fact, too, that in 1961, if you're using a typewriter, when you go to the next line, it automatically goes to the left margin. And you can see and I always use the example to compare to is there's that Nordic birth certificate that's out there.
You're talking about the Nordic twins, the family last name Nordic.
Correct. That they posted what a birth certificate from Hawaii should look like in 1961. And when you look at this document, which, by the way, I also write in my report that I think when they did this document, they used the Nordic document as a template on how it should look. And when you look at the Nordic document, you can see that most of the items have been, completely got a perfectly lined up left margin, just as I'm saying with a typewriter. Obama's left margin is all over the place. They don't. You don't have people typing in an office, all these birth certificates. And again, for Obama's, because they know it's going to be special, that all of a sudden they're spacing in because it doesn't even look like they're set tabs, standard tab set. It looks like, according to the way they constructed this document, that they would have to do several different spaces, and I'm sure maybe even the spacing's off.
Mara, in your estimation, is the forger a novice in using Adobe?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I always say this. I've said it in my report. I've said it in other interviews. I always think that whoever did this fancied himself, an expert possibly. He knew enough to be dangerous, but not enough to cover his tracks, is what I always say. Okay,
it's one thing to, separate it, a novice forger and someone who's novice in Adobe software. You're saying that the person who did this isn't even very good in Adobe.
He probably thinks he is. He probably, in his own mind, thinks he is. There's a lot of people I have come across I can't tell you in my couple decades of working with the program here, how many people take a few courses, at college in Photoshop or whatever software it is, and they consider themselves experts. And I can't tell you how much they don't know.
Mara, why would Obama, if he is committing a criminal act, which I am convinced he is a criminal, he's a liar, why would he use such an amateur to do this?
Well, I've heard Corsi say on this topic, and I tend to agree with him. It's not like the White House can, advertise for, expert forger. So I kind of have a theory in my own mind too, which I do believe that Obama tends to have dictatorship-like qualities. And what I mean by that is, that if you look at many of the history of dictators and stuff like that, they tend to have a very strong paranoia component to their personality, and so they stay within their inner circle for everything. And I think that this is what probably went on here as well. He's going to stay within his inner circle, find somebody within his circle that knows about the programs, and let them fly with it. He's not going to want to go outside of that circle to get somebody that knows something about the program to do it.
Well, compare this to Richard Nixon's his infamous group called the Plumbers, the ex-CIA guys that G. Gordon Liddy and others that broke into the Democratic National Committee's office in the Watergate building. Okay. All right, those guys were pros at what they had done. I mean, but Nixon attempted for several years to cover up that criminal act, and it eventually brought down his presidency. In this case, Obama didn't even use a professional.
Well, and you've got to also understand that within his inner circle, okay, because I do believe that somebody within his inner circle is doing this, but within that inner circle, most of the people that he surrounds himself with are not really familiar with American history or American lifestyles. I mean,
Good point.
It's, this is somebody that's not familiar with, our history of working with a typewriter, not, the history of, how things are done. Even the race of Father African, that wouldn't have been the option.
It would have been Negro.
Right, but somebody not familiar with our history is not going to know that,
Which tells us it's a young person.
That too. I do think that there is a young component.
Who had no idea about manual typewriters, what it was like, what was it like to be in a government office building in 1960-something, it was,
right.
I mean.
Yeah, and just to educate any listeners out there that might not be familiar with typewriters too, because like I said, I've heard the argument about how spacing can be altered by speed typing. Just to let them know that with typewriters, they were monospaced, which means that every letter was allotted the exact same amount of space, regardless of what the letter was. So a thin letter I would still have the same amount of space allotted to it as a thicker letter like W or something.
Mar, I want to ask you about are there misspellings?
Yes. It's funny you should ask. Yeah, in the stamp, and you would think that an official stamp had been, spell checked, which apparently, the stamp down at the bottom for Alvin Anaka has the word TXE instead of THE in the stamp.
Okay, Alvin Onaka was the Hawaii State Register at the time.
Correct.
All right,
correct.
And there is a misspelling in the stamp, the official stamp.
Yeah, well, I don't think he was the state register at the time of the birth. He was probably the state register at the time of the release of this copy of the birth certificate.
All right, but there is a misspelling in the official stamp on the document.
Correct. And
so that means every document stamped by Mr. Onaka has the misspelling in it.
Correct, and there isn't. The other stamps that, they show stamps of Alvin Onaka on other documents, and there is no misspelling. And if you look at the document, too, there's evidence that the letters, and I'm not sure why, but maybe because they had like a copy of it and it wasn't very clear, and so they altered it. But it looks like the letters surrounding that word is also been, it's got a different quality again.
Okay, is it true that there's a smiley face on the document?
Yeah, there is. On the A, there's a smiley face in Alvin, which isn't on any of the other stamps as well.
The A in the name Alvin, and I'm looking at it right now. When you do a close-up of A, there's a smiley face. Why is there a smiley face?
I have no idea. I know Corsi theorizes that, it might be the forger's way of just having fun with the document.
So he was not only was he a poor forger, he was an arrogant little punk. Yeah.
I actually think I see the arrogance in the signature of the local register in the form itself, Box 21, which many people have also noticed that the signature is U.K.L. Lee, which, first of all, I would like to ask the question, how many people would sign their names with just initials, and how many people would have that many initials?
Is that ukulele?
Yeah, if you say it quickly, fast, it's ukulele, which I think is a joke name, too, as well. I think this is another instance.
There's nobody named ukulele.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So I have no proof of that, but that's just a theory, so I'm just throwing that out there.
I mean, going back to the misspelling of the, T-H-E, in the official stamp of the Hawaii State Register, Alvin Onaka, right there is enough to get a conviction. Right there. I want to see, Mr. Onaga, every document you've stamped in the last 5 years that has the misspelling in it.
And a smiley face and the misspelling.
And I want to see you sign your name with your hand, and I want you to put that little smiley face in your A.
Well, just on that note alone, too, I'd like to also make the point that, doesn't everybody always warn us that, when we're getting hoax emails, scams, whatever, that one of the first tip-off signs to look for is misspellings.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have a misspelling in an official document that's supposed to be his, birth certificate. And
so you think this is a subconscious admission of what's going on?
For who? You mean for Obama?
No, the forger. Not even realizing he was. I mean, Columbo would have nailed this guy.
Yeah, I know. Hell,
it would have been a 5-minute Columbo movie. It had been over. They couldn't even make a movie out of this thing. Columbo would say, "What the heck? Is it good? I got him already."
I'm thinking that who's the deputy for Andy?
Barney. Barney.
I think Barney could.
Yeah, Barney get a conviction on this one. But the FBI can't do anything.
Yeah.
Oh, no, where's the FBI? Where's the federal courts? Where are the federal judges? Where is the United States Justice Department? FBI, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You ought to put a bag over your head.
And as far as to answer, the email that I was discussing earlier about the congressman, or maybe I can't remember if I had this discussion with you off air or on air, but the congressman aide that was telling me that everybody knows it's fake, but basically nobody wants to do anything about it because, they're afraid of being taken seriously.
You had a congressional aide admit to you that everybody in Washington knows it's a fake?
Yeah, in an email. And she said, but unfortunately, her exact words were something to the line, I'm paraphrasing, that because of his preempting any naysayers that there's conspiracy theories, that everyone on the Hill is pretty much afraid of, speaking out because they wouldn't be taken seriously.
So in Alice in Wonderland, if you say conspiracy theory, that just locks up everybody's brain and they can't deal with reality.
Correct.
They have a brain freeze.
Correct. And I just thinking to myself, they have no idea that the opposite would be true. I mean, not only would they be taken seriously, but I honestly get a sense that the majority of the people in this country not only know it's fake, they're craving to hear somebody speak out about it. They need the closure to hear this.
Well, there's millions of us who haven't drank the Kool-Aid.
Correct.
We still have our thinking faculties working.
Yeah, when I went to I went to Washington D.C. WorldNet Daily flew me out there for doing a press conference, and on my travels, getting just even a ride to the airport, I took a shuttle, and in the shuttle van there was conversation going around, the small talk, where are you traveling to, what are you going for? When it came around to me, I said, well, I'm going to Washington, D.C., and they said, what are you going there for? And I said, well, I'm going for a press conference. I kind of was hesitant to tell the information because I didn't know, what the sentiment was in the van. And so they're going, well, what are you going to a press conference for? And I said, well, you won't laugh if I tell you, because kind of like the congressman, I'm thinking, there might be some people in there that might not like what I have to say. And they're going, no, you got our attention now. So I told them that I was going there to discuss the fact that Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate wasn't legitimate. And the explosion of interest in this story, and on a positive note, I mean, everybody in the van was just, all of a sudden I had their attention, and they're all, just dumbfounded and glued.
Nobody laughed at you.
Nobody laughed. They all wanted to hear everything I had to say.
They didn't stop the van and throw you out on the tarmac.
No. In fact, the driver said, hell, if I could, I'd drive you to D.C. myself. I'm so proud to meet you. and I honestly think that this would be the response for the congressman if they would just have the guts to speak out.
Well, they live in Alice in Wonderlandville in Washington, D.C., and all they worry about is what will the news media say about us? That's all they care about. What will the news media say? Who gives a flip what the news media says?
I call my congressman frequently, and I always tell them, if you don't have the media's approval, you're doing something right.
That's right.
You don't care about what the media wants you to say. I don't know what else to do. I do everything I can to get the word out, and
well, I'm going to tell you, we're going to stay on this. I'm so glad that you have come forward and you have stated on the record as a professional, as an expert in Adobe Illustrator and Adobe software, that this, without a doubt, is a forgery. If you were subpoenaed to a federal court, would you testify as an expert witness?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
You'd put your name on the line, your career on the line. You'd say, as an expert witness, I would categorically state that this is a forgery.
I would. People say, aren't you afraid about speaking out? And I think to myself, I'm more afraid about not speaking out. What would happen to this country, if there aren't people that, come out and say what the truth is?
Would you have any question in your mind that in a federal courtroom, if you went on record stating as an expert witness that the Obama birth certificate is a forgery, would you have any question in your mind about whether Obama could bring forth a witness equal to your expertise that could refute what you're saying?
Well, I'm sure he could always bring somebody out that could refute what I'm saying, but there's just so much here that would refute the refuter. Does that make sense?
No, I know people can deny, but I'm talking about proving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, because I'm looking at your evidence, and it's like, well, how do you dispute it?
Well, let me give you some arguments that are already out there. I mean, some people are trying to say that you can already get a lot of layers by the compression settings when you save the document. Now, actually, when I compress this document, the layers actually go away. But I have tested it out on other documents. I've scanned in documents and then just try saving as a PDF with compression, open it up in Illustrator to see what I see in layers. There are layers. Compression does produce layer with some of the documents I've done. But here's the big difference. The layers that are produced when you do it that way don't have any kind of rhyme or reason to it. It's the computer trying to decide where there's areas that look similar, and it, all of a sudden will group it into kind of like blocks, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, putting it together.
Right. But the computer doesn't change the fonts.
Right.
The computer doesn't put a smiley face in a signature.
The computer also, unlike this document, when you look at the layers on this document, the layers are smart. They're not, randomly generated by a computer. You have one layer that's the entire background, one layer that's the text. You know what I'm saying? The computer on the other examples that I'm talking about where I tried it out, it couldn't differentiate between the text and the background. If it took a chunk of the document and put it on a layer, the whole chunk is there. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, there's no way that it got layers, via the compression.
Well, Mara, we're going to stay on it. I know you are, and I am sending this program to members of the U.S. Congress. There are people in Washington who are asking for more information. Slowly, quietly, there are people in Washington starting to admit this is so obvious that we cannot ignore it any longer. And again, I'm calling on the FBI. Do your job. Do your job. I grew up in the 50s and 60s as a kid. It was a time when boys and girls were told to respect the FBI. I've lost all respect for the FBI. I've lost it all. They're a bunch of political patsies. They will not uphold the law. Look at the ATF. The ATF, a bunch of gun runners. I mean, we have become a land of lawlessness. We used to be the land of the rule of law. We are now a land of lawlessness. And if we don't get a grip on this thing really fast, we're going to be a banana republic.
Well, I think the answer is smaller government and to not have government agencies run things, to have the private sector, fill that role.
That's right. That's right. We need a renaissance in this country of constitutional government. But number one, before we do anything, we've got to seize control of this runaway regime in Washington. If they can get away with putting an imposter in the White House, then we've lost our country forever. We'll never, ever again know for certain that the man in the White House is a legitimate American citizen, because they have succeeded now for over 3 years in propping up an imposter. This man ought to be in prison. He is a criminal. He is a liar. He is a deceiver. He is a Mac Daddy. He is a pimp. He's a street hustler, and he needs to go to prison.
You're singing to the choir.
I know. Listen, Mara, I appreciate you being on the program. My guest, Mara Zebest, and we are going to stay on this issue. Thank you, Mara. Appreciate you being on True News.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.